So welcome to the Maturity Project. I'm your host, Chad Everett Rocheers, and today we're going to be speaking with a friend of mine, Nate, that I'm going to let him introduce himself, give a little brief introduction, and then we're going to dig into some subjects here. So, Nate, go ahead and take it away, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, depends on what you want to know. My name's Nate. I'm 32
Yeah, just start
years
off
old.
with who you are and where you're from, how old you are.
I'm from Florida. I've put on a lot of different hats, so I'm always, whenever someone asks me to introduce myself, I'm always a little bit undecided on what parts of myself to introduce. But
Yeah.
I've done a few different things: college graduate, Peace Corps volunteer, lacrosse player, fitness enthusiast, insurance adjuster, salesman. I mean, you name it, I've tried it. But life's an adventure, and I like it a lot. Oh, and a Christian, that's a big one for me. So that's and oldest of 6. There's another one that's I think if I'm going to share all the titles that I think have defined me, I think those are some key ones.
I love it. So just so everybody understands, so I met Nate because him and I worked at a gym that it's local to us. And, my experience of him, it took me probably, 3 days for me to go, Nate, I think you're an incredibly good person and you are a good manager, right? Because he's a manager at a local gym in town here as a general manager. And, it's actually kind of interesting how the whole thing happened because I did not know anything else that was going on. We don't necessarily need to go into the story except for we had an unruly customer that really was not anything that had to do with Nate. And she just happened to be like, he was the person to explain company policies. And she had told him that he was the worst manager or a bad manager. And I had no idea of that because I'm sitting here going, well, I'm working with this guy and I'm impressed with this human being. Right. So this is not like, by the way, if anybody's curious about this, flattery is not something I'm into. Because flattery is not a desirable thing that you want somebody to do to you. If you're not familiar with that, anybody look up the definition of flattery. So you can pause the video if you like, and then you get back to it so that you find out exactly what I'm talking about there. But in a very genuine sense, that's pretty much my preference anyway. I like this guy. Like Nate is incredibly impressive. He's done a lot of stuff. For being his age is another factor. So you just turned, I want to say, you said 32, correct?
Just 32 a couple days ago.
Yeah. Just turned 32 a couple of days ago. Here I am, 45, the old guy in the market, and, I come across somebody and go, you know what? If I were to die tomorrow, I know that this world is still in good hands because I'm still meeting good people. And Nate's one of those people. So I've asked him to join me on this. So that's why he's here, right? The Peace Corps, impressive, awesome. The stuff he's into, we'll get into some of those things because if you're familiar, obviously if you've been watching this channel, you're familiar with the Maturity Project in the 8 areas. And I really feel that Nate embodies several of those areas very well. So with that being said, Nate, you can start anywhere you want to at least give a little bit more introduction. And then we're going to go to our past, right? We're going to go back as far back as we feel comfortable doing. So, please, so anything you want to add to that, or you want to jump back to the past as is?
Oh, let's jump back to the past. I think that's I think the past informs who we are in the present.
Right.
So as we kind of dig into that, you'll get a better idea of who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah. So all right, 8 areas of maturity. We will all start noticing specific things that the authorities around us give us praise for, and then we start seeing some degree of acuity for. Right. And that's where we'll say, hey, this is worthy of pursuing a growth or development in. So if you find out you're funny, then we'll spend time on that. If you find out you're more informative, if you're a leader, whatever it is, we'll have these things that kind of show up that we now cherish about who we are, an attribute of our character to the way that we express ourselves to the world. Because nobody wants to be another blank sheet in a stack of papers, right? We all want to stand out enough that we know that we matter and that we have some sort of value within the hierarchy and then in over the total of existence, right? So you being the person that I recognize you for, one, you do seem to embody integrity, and that's not common, but most people will say they have it. If you say you have it and that other people don't, that you probably don't. right? Well, you've never said that word to me that I can recall. I'm putting that term on you. So a man of integrity. You have a passion to help others and to be supportive. So in your youth, do you recognize any point in time that kind of like stood out that made you go, hey, this is something that, like your earliest memory of that area or any one of those areas that made you who you are today?
I mean, I could think of many. I
Okay.
will give credit where credit is due. My parents are high integrity people.
Good.
I was raised in an environment where integrity was encouraged, was highlighted, was emphasized as an essential part of who someone is. And what makes you good or bad is not success by some, in the way my mother would phrase it, in any worldly measure or worldly category. It's who you are that matters in the end. My siblings are all that way as well. I can't speak highly enough of them. They are 5 of my best friends, if not my 5 best friends. And they are probably the 5 people in the world that I trust the most. And obviously, there's some ownership that any individual needs to take for who they are. It's up to you to be a person of integrity, to be a person of principle. And I would say that all my siblings do that. But we were also all raised in a household that heavily emphasized integrity and principle from the time we were very young. So I had an education in that and an environment that cultivated, encouraged that. I was also homeschooled, which is a big deal.
Okay.
My throughout my formative years, all the way up through the beginning of high school, my environment was curated by very intentional, deliberate parents. They're not perfect people by any stretch of the imagination, as nobody is, right?
Yeah.
So there's plenty of occurrences, and my parents and I have had conversations where it's been kind of a realization of course, where I've made mistakes. Hey, mom and dad, I'm sorry I didn't appreciate this as much as I maybe should have when I was younger. Thanks so much for doing X, Y, Z. But I've had conversations with them where they've said, I realize now that you're in your 20s and your youngest brother is now at the age where, I maybe didn't handle you as well, that I didn't handle you as well. And so we've had those conversations. And so even though they are still improving as parents now, with their youngest is about to turn 19, my youngest brother, and they're still improving in the way that they manage their kids and the relationships and the responsibility of being a parent. They have been intentional the entire time. And so I got to give a lot of credit to, the environment that you're raised in and the values that are taught you when you are very young and developing.
I if you don't mind, I want to ask some questions about that, because look,
Yeah.
the thing about the maturity project is also about interrupting what we consider to be family legacies.
Sure.
Right. Where a lot of times how you can identify family legacies where you feel cursed that your family will be this way as the generations move on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Where like for you, there's this very structural process that is creating well-adjusted people. Right. I've met people that have been homeschooled and they're like socially awkward.
Sure.
You're not socially awkward. You're actually one of the more socially acceptable people that I've met within very short periods of time, because you're kind of you and yourself. I may have mentioned this to you about other people, but like with G, I'd mentioned like he's like a golden retriever on the floor. You just have that kind of like friendliness about you, that kind of accommodation about you. That's like, I'm just curious. I want to know you. And I want to present a world that allows you to get to know me.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the way I've experienced you, because you don't come across as being overly guarded or socially awkward. So
yeah, I would maybe attribute some of that to my again, go back to my environment. My family is very social. 6 kids is a lot.
Yeah, I'm
6
second to
kids,
youngest out of
lots
6,
of
by the way.
yeah. Okay, so you understand
Second to
kind of
youngest
how
out of 6. Yeah.
yeah. And we're lots of big personalities. I have always really enjoyed verbal communication. I would say now at 32, I'm much more socially adept than I was in my 20s. I would say to compliment myself, I'm a good communicator, especially verbally, face to face. I think I do a good job. I think on my feet pretty quickly when it comes to verbal communication, which is a blessing. And it's also a skill that I think is not, certainly it could be a God-given talent, but also it's something that has been practiced. And so I really enjoy it. I like long form conversation. Um, and I've met few people who have the endurance that I do when it comes to conversation, and whether it be a more structured debate, whether it be casual conversation, whether it be joking around, whether it be my personal favorite is intellectual investigation of any idea. I take anything. Give me your hottest take. Give me the thing that you're contemplating the most. The question that you have just no answer to. We don't need to find an answer, but I'll go explore that for hours and hours and hours on end, and not in an aggressive way, or at least I don't mean it in an aggressive way. But I'll pick apart your ideas and your attempts at explaining. I expect you to do the same for me. I promise you, I'll never get tired. Like, just we can go and go and go until we're both blue in the face, and I'm genuinely enjoying myself, having a good time. And I think that leads to having that the relishing in that experience leads to a tendency to do it more often. And as you communicate verbally more often, you get more proficient at it. And so I think that contributes a lot, along with having a large family that is a lot of big personalities, and we are very social. So I think the combination, and my parents didn't homeschool for the purpose of sheltering. I mean, certainly they wanted to have a little bit more control over the information and the education that came in. They didn't love the public education system here in Florida, but they didn't. They protected us in that they, made sure that they got to filter our understanding and not filter our experiences. So, hey, I've experienced this. I'm going to ask my parents questions. Questions were never discouraged. Okay, now we're going to explain it to you. And so it wasn't, I'm going to keep you from ever thinking about it. It's like, well, I'm going to encourage you to, but because you're around me all the time, now I get to have that conversation about, you learned about sex, and now we're going to tell you what that's about. You learned about Santa Claus, whatever it is, and we're going to have a conversation the way we would like you to experience that idea, and so that we can frame it in a way that's productive. And I think that they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I agree with that. And here's something for people to consider, like, as I'm not a big fan of the public education system either, with having a 3-year-old son, because of the way that it's just, look, I want my son to be raised in a way that he's still my son. And unfortunately, the public education system has veered away from that by having different agendas. And I'll speak openly about that, because I don't care as far as other people's worries or concerns. I would rather, like you, let's have dialogue about this, and then we can come to a better understanding. I won't hide it out of the fear of that somebody else is going to reject my view. I'm more mature than that as a person, so I really don't care for that. But what I want to explore a bit more is that the reason why I say that a lot of the people that I've met, and when I say a lot, I'm not saying 95% of the people that I've met and from homeschool has been socially awkward. I'm not saying that. It's just, it seems to be enough that's noteworthy for me to go, homeschooling has the potential of being a miss, but that miss is a lifelong experience. Now, public school has gotten to the point that it holds the same thing, but it's doing it en masse because they have the ability to. So as I get to know you, and by the way, for everybody here, Nate and I have only known each other now for about a month, maybe.
Yeah, month and a half ish.
Yeah, something like that. Like, it's been a very short period of time, but I'll tell you this. I asked him to come on because of who he is as a person. So now we're kind of like understanding what's under the layers to get him to where he is. So with that, it's the homeschool paradox, if you will, right? Because a lot of times when you hear homeschool and Christian, it's usually a subsect of Christianity. That, in my experience, it's anecdotal, but in my experience, it's the subsect of Christianity that would be more of what people would start saying, that's kind of cult-like or whatever. That is not my experience of you, and that is not in any way, and I'm not saying that's the case for everybody, because they're coming from, and by the way, I'm not Christian, but that Christianity, in my opinion, is the best of all of them, just because of the peaceful nature of the entirety of it, and the I'm more of what you would call a Jefferson Christian. Okay. So and I cherish Christianity, and I'm finding out in myself what the block is to return, because I was born and raised by a Baptist. So anyway, but not to digress into that, by the way, but I cherish it and I value it completely. But that's to keep complete honesty. But the people that I have met that have been homeschooled and have the religious guise that's over it, a good degree of them have had some serious social awkwardness assimilating into society once they've left the family unit. The reason why I think it's valuable to talk about this is because for the people that are thinking about starting a family, don't be afraid to get into homeschooling or module or I think pod learning, I think is the terms for it, where small communities come together and they pay teachers that they vet themselves to teach their kids during the day. So again, I'm not wanting to belabor too long on this subject, but what I want to do is to help express like why homeschooling can be significantly beneficial, because you are the person, you are the poster child of what I would expect or what I would want to lead people to go homeschool under Christian under Christian ideology.
Yeah, I mean, so just having had probably a little bit more experience with homeschooling than the average person, having gone
I'm
through
public school, by the way. So yes,
yeah.
please.
So we had a variety of experiences in kind of our homeschool journey. We did some, we called them co-ops, where you have a group of homeschooled families, moms mostly, with their kids. They come usually once a week, and they'll do kind of the things are difficult to do at home, especially if you have, one or two kids. You can't really have a drama class. What are you going to, just you and your mom are going to do sketch comedy together? There's benefit to it, right? There's ways to get around it. Science experiments are another one. They can be a little more cost intense. So if you're paying for all the materials to do a science experiment, each one's going to be around $40 to $50 probably. You do that once a week. It adds up, especially for my family. Everything was on a budget. So you come together and you have 30 kids maybe, and you're doing some of these things together to cut costs and offload some of the responsibility. Most of those co-ops, in my experience, were basically glorified daycare, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was disorganized. You had a lot of the socially awkward, a lot of people who were educating, but not to be overly judgmental, but not well. So that was a challenge. My mom actually started her own co-op group. She's a teacher. She was a teacher before. She started homeschooling. She's been back in the classroom since then. She's good at it. She's a good teacher. She cares a lot about her. She gets both cerebral and emotional satisfaction in helping a student understand. And it's not just about, do you know the facts and the information? It's, do you understand how these things fit together? So she's science-based, right? She loves science and math. My science and math education is probably where I have the strongest education. Her love between the science, the math, and connecting that to history, to biblical studies. She has 2 degrees, education in biblical studies, Old Testament specifically. And so all of these things, it's a much more cohesive curriculum, where it's not, are you passing the tests? And so I think homeschooling can be tremendous. And I think if you have a parent or both parents who are heavily invested and they are good communicators and they have the ability to teach and educate, it is wonderful. It is not a tool to shelter your child from the world. And
and thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. I wouldn't encourage it for everybody. If you don't know what you're doing and you're not going to make teaching your kids your full-time job, don't do it. It's a lot.
I can see easily how you take the standard curriculum and add in the maturity project, and that turn into like a curriculum to guide children into becoming incredibly functional adults. And by the way, when I say that on the maturity project side of things, this is not a complete education. I don't know if it ever will be, because maturing doesn't really have an end. It's just you learn new steps, right?
I think if you have any area of education and you consider it complete, then you misunderstand education as an idea.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. It always should be able to grow. But if we added in the standard curriculum, you have your science, your math, right? You've got your English, your writing, and add in 8 areas of maturity, we're very likely to create a more functional adult that's not going to be crushed by either an affair or the financial, the debt that people can take on, or whatever, like the frustration of not being able to move up in their companies, or they lose their health, or they're overweight, or whatever. No friends, or no purpose, or their sex life is just, not satisfying. You add those things into it in a way that people can comprehend it. I can foresee that becoming a superior education personally, but if you go about it the way that your experience has been, I have a curriculum that works with that. To me, that's exciting because you are incredibly well. And again, this is just acknowledgement, but you're incredibly well put together for being 32 years old. I've met a lot of people with the line of work that I've been in, or the lines of work that I've been in, and my experiences, and you stand out. And why do you stand out? As a curiosity. Now I know that you're homeschooled. I had no idea about that prior to this conversation. And now I'm actually kind of surprised, because my expectation of people that are homeschooled has been like, they're well put together in some areas, but they're awkward mostly in the social settings.
Sure.
You're not at all. Actually, if anything, you win friends where other people would take time to actually even gain access to acquaintance. So it's fascinating to me. You're capable of that. So anyway, I don't mean to dominate. I just wanted to continue to express and to open up the playing field for the mental space for people that are watching and listening to this.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons that I was interested in coming on and talking to you about this is, you gave me the kind of outline of what you want to try to develop as a product to present to the world, to say, hey, here are some areas that you need to really invest in yourself. Right. And like you said, you shouldn't be viewing any of these things, these pillars of maturity, as things that can be completed. Right. That's not how any of this works.
Never get there. You're not going to get there.
Yeah.
Actually, if I can, before you finish that thought, originally it was not the maturity project. Originally it was ascending to total maturity. And I had to take back the name, because there is no ascension. You don't get there. There's no like final area. You can't reach total maturity. Like, all right, that name doesn't work. So, all right, I wanted to give you that because I had to take it back. It became the maturity project.
No. Are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yeah. Yes.
You experienced that firsthand right there.
I did too.
Yeah. It's just how it goes.
By the way,
I think I appreciate. Go ahead.
Would you mind explaining that? Because some people that are watching may not understand the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is the idea that in anything that you're learning about, that you're becoming educated in, there is a curve, and you could say the x-axis, or the bottom, as you move forward on it, is your level of understanding, right? It goes across your level of understanding. And vertically, the y-axis is your confidence. And basically the curve starts and it spikes and then drops dramatically once you realize, so you start to understand, and kind of big picture, you might kind of understand the ideas, and then you realize how little you understand and you drop. And then as you get more and more towards the expert kind of realm, gradually your confidence goes up. But it's common. I see it in all kinds. Some of those successful people that I know in different avenues of life, they tend to have this Dunning-Kruger effect, and you can kind of see where on the curve that they are. I've seen it a lot with people who are young, and they reach a level of like financial success is a common one, where they seem to think that they have life figured out because they figure out one aspect of life. But it's like your little project there, where you have it's more than one pillar, right? You can have one area of life pretty well understood, and then you realize, oh my gosh, there's so much I don't understand. But it takes breaking through that barrier of ignorance to figure that out.
You know what I love about that is that when you get to that point, you feel like you're the specialist in that area or expert in it. When you humble yourself, you come back down and you say, hey, I've actually got a lot of other areas that I need to work on. You realize that you actually didn't have it all figured out in that one area either.
Right.
Right. It's a really fascinating, humbling experience that actually accelerates your opportunities, but you have to hit it. Right. And that it's hard to hit it if you don't understand there's 7 other areas. Again, that's coming from me, and my education is that it's 8 areas. Other people may have other preferences of the way that they view existence, but still. Anyway, I don't want to digress any further because,
Sure.
again, it's like this is to get to know you. It's not so much to get to know the maturity project because I've got a lot of videos on that, and they continue to cultivate themselves into becoming more and more proficient. But the Nate effect, if you will, is something that I really want to continue to bring out here. So, and I apologize to anybody that's like, hey, you know what? This is what it's like for me when I meet somebody who's one of those thinkers. Because when I meet a thinker, I get excited to get to know the thinker. Nate is a thinker. He's not just a thinker. He's a doer too, but
he's burden of mine.
Yeah, he's somebody who has layers of thinking. And I've acknowledged and appreciated that about him. That's why I've asked him to come on. Now we're unfolding the layer, or we're pulling back the layers of the onion on it, if you will, and realizing that there's a lot more to Nate than meets the eye, which is the case for all of us, right? But he's actually broke through something that I didn't realize has been a position that I held, because it wasn't one that I had much critical thinking on. I just had accepted thinking. If you're not familiar with that, accepted thinking is where somebody says something that holds a position of authority to any degree, and you just take it and you move on. You didn't spend time really working your way through it. There's no critical aspects about it. It's just, okay, like the president says something, you accept it, right? Your teacher says something, you don't critically think against it. You're like, I need to remember this because it's going to be on the test. My experiences and the acceptance thinking is that people that are homeschooled has been that they're socially awkward. And again, it's not all, but I've met more than the average, or more than less, right, that have been in that category. So Nate breaks that. So now it's like, okay, well, let's really open up this conversation to understand who Nate is, because Nate's volunteered to the Peace Corps. Nate has, he's coming from that. That's a direct against the face of my conceptions of what I believed. And I didn't believe it because I caught myself there. Just somebody else gave me that thought, and I didn't even think I had it, right? To believe that people that are homeschooled are socially awkward. Well, this guy isn't. Point of it is that we don't have to accept the fact that, what other people have made us think is true. We can truly get to know somebody who comes from that and go, man, if you knew what I had actually accepted as thought, you would be like, yeah, dude, you're an asshole. Here's the thing. We carry a lot of this guy as an asshole or this person as an asshole throughout our life without understanding things like this, right? So if Nate were to be that person and not be that insightful, and he understood the way that I thought without really thinking about it, he'd be like, wow, Chad's really not as nice as I thought he was. But it's not like it carried any heavy burden about the way that people are coming from homeschool. It would usually go, oh yeah, it makes sense. They're homeschooled. Yep. You're now going, we're not all like that. And here's why. So now I don't want to make this entire episode about homeschooling, right? But it's just to understand you and understand more about, like, how can you be this person in life to inspire other people to say, hey, I may have started off in this other place, but now I can get to this where I am now, or where he is, or some version of where he is. So we have integrity because your parents have taught you it, and have really been those people that modeled it, not just said it, they were it, right? We've got the intellectual values, because you're definitely no dullard, right? I consider you to be somewhere above average in intelligence. I just don't know where that IQ test would point you out at, right? But definitely above average in my personal experience. And it's anecdotal, but I still feel that way.
Yeah, I think that's it is above average, but it's, I don't think it's an important metric. There's plenty of maturity to be gained regardless of where you fall on that. There are plenty of people who I've met who are in the plenty. I mean, you don't meet plenty, but in the high 90 percentile, and they lack a lot of maturity. I think maturity comes a lot of times from being humbled. And if you're the smartest person in the room 99% of the time, you're not going to get humbled very often. In the same respect, if you're the strongest guy in the room 99% of the time, you're not going to get humbled that often. If you're the most financially successful person in the room 99% of the time, you're not going to get humbled that often. And so, that's just another area. It definitely took me longer in areas of intellectualism to really be humbled. But it happens, and generally it hurts more if it takes a while. It's easy to be humbled when you're 8 because it's just how things go. You kind of assume that everyone is bigger, stronger, smarter than you. But when it takes you till you're a little bit older, it's man, it hurts the ego.
It sure does when we get older.
Hurts the ego. Yeah, but the Peace Corps was interesting. I'll kind of segue, if you don't mind, from the education to the Peace Corps.
Yes, please.
My perspective on education and it being valuable, not to an end, but for its own good. I believe intellectual pursuit or exploration and education, they are both valuable in and of themselves. And they go hand in hand. And that was really fun. I ended up going to a liberal arts school.
Keep going.
Oh, he's gone.
Keep going. Sorry.
Okay, good.
I'm still here. I had to turn the hearts on.
Which I think echoes some of the things that, the philosophies of liberal arts education, I think echoes some of the things that you've been talking about or have brought up kind of indirectly in the way you describe your pursuit of maturity. It's like certainly you have the pillars of maturity that you've drawn lines of distinction between, but I would argue in the way that you communicate and in all likelihood, the way you understand it is that maturity isn't something that really can be separated. There isn't some invisible line between your, intellectual, social, financial, business, spiritual maturity. Like really, they are all different parts of one. And they are tied together. As you improve in one, the others will also see a form of growth, similar to exercise, right? You can't really exercise and isolate one muscle purely by itself. The other muscles that are connected indirectly or directly will be affected by the stimulation of the one. And so I think education is that way as well. We have different classes because we gotta have to group information together, but the reality is that they are connected. And I led that. I used education as a tool to, as I improve my knowledge and understanding of the world, I can improve my knowledge and understanding of self, where and when I am, and the ideas and thoughts of existential contemplation are really fun for me. I love it a lot. That ultimately is what led me to the conviction that, man, I got to do something that I can feel proud of. Is I think what I found myself feeling. I had a job in finance after I graduated with my economics degree. And I said, I hate this. And if I keep working here, I'm going to be depressed to the point of suicide if I keep doing this. So I said, I got to apply to some other things. So the Peace Corps is what manifested as an opportunity first, lots of prayer about it. And I said, okay, this is what is being offered as an opportunity. I'm gonna go do it. To give a brief summary of what the Peace Corps is, John F. Kennedy started in 1961 in an effort to combat the spread of communism, essentially. Hey, how can we combat these ideas? Well, we'll go and spread the ideas of capitalism and the ideas of democracy and freedom around the world. We'll do that by going into these developing nations and underdeveloped nations, by assisting them, becoming an ally, being friendly, and sharing culture in both directions. And so you have to be a college graduate, you have to be a U.S. citizen, and you apply. It's pretty competitive, about 25% acceptance rate or less than that, maybe. Let's see.
I didn't know it was that low.
Yeah, it might be even less than that. I think it might have been 15 or 20% when I joined. So you apply, you can get posted. There's a bunch of things that can rule you out. Like if you have any health issues, no chance. Like it just is dangerous. You're under the care of the U.S. government. They send you to these rural locations, rural Mongolia, rural Africa, rural Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, South America, Central America, and depending on what country you're in, it's going to affect what your project is. So I was in Zambia, which is a sub-Saharan African country. It is on, if you know anything about any economic metrics to evaluate the development of a country, it's in the bottom 10% of all of them. It's a tough place. I mean, income inequality is high. Average or per capita GDP very, very low. It's landlocked. It's the average income there is like a couple dollars a day, maybe.
Oh wow!
I mean, it's
couple
tough.
American dollars, yeah. And that's going to be a third world nation, right?
Yeah.
Definitely on the low end of it.
It is so Zambia is actually the most rural Peace Corps post or Peace Corps country in all of the Peace Corps.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And I was in, I would say about like bottom 10% of Peace Corps. So when you go, you get trained for 3 months in language, cultural sensitivity training, and project objectives. So you can go with an education, but like, did you study specifically economic development in Zambia? Because if you didn't, we need to teach you. So they teach you your project goals. And then after those 3 months, you get sent to a village by yourself, and you're there for 2 years straight in a hut and whatever.
Wait, so 2 straight years. You don't come home. There's no vacation from this.
I took a week or two. Or two. In the middle, you're allowed to take a vacation, but it's not standard. You don't.
Yeah.
You're there for 2 years.
But you're there.
I was there for a year, and then I for the first Christmas I was gone. I came back, and then I was there for the rest of the time.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So it's like a year on either end. Yeah. In a hut. A lot of your time is spent just kind of living. But my project was sustainable or local economic development through sustainable agriculture. They are subsistence farmers. They grow the food that they eat. Yeah. Their margins are razor thin. There's no excess. And so the idea is, okay, you work incredibly hard. Some of the hardest working people I've ever met are the people that I met in the village I was in, or the surrounding villages. They're waking up at 3 a.m. to get out and put in a 7 to 8 hour day before it gets so hot they can't work in the field anymore. I mean, they are battling to survive.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know how to farm, you know how to work hard. What can we do to make your efforts more efficient? That was my objective. There are other objectives that Peace Corps volunteers in Zambia have. There's health volunteers. They generally do management of local clinics. There's education volunteers. They're teaching English as a second language. There's animal husbandry volunteers are doing fish farming and other animal husbandry techniques. My favorite thing that I did while I was there is I built or put together a workshop with a friend of mine who was another volunteer. I was the first volunteer. Generally, they cycle 3 through, each one being there for 2 years. The third one having an option to extend or request for a 4th volunteer. But generally, what they see is a diminishing marginal return on the investment after 6 years or 3 volunteers. The community that you're in has adopted what they're going to adopt, and it's tough to kind of push through.
Interesting. What might be the blocks on that, right? So where were you in the generation there, right? Were you first, second, or third generation? Okay, you're first generation in that cycle. What did they give you anything as far as like potential breakthroughs or anybody that actually did make a breakthrough from the traditional 3 cycles or 3 generations? And when I say generation, it's just what I mean by that is like what you mean by 2 years in a stint, right?
Yeah.
So we could refer to that as cycles too, whichever way is the best way to qualify that.
Yeah.
But that would be 3 cycles, and then pretty much everybody's adapted to the depth that they're going to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, you can break out of that. It's possible, but you just, again, it's better to go to another site, right?
Okay.
They've kind of made up their mind. It's tough to change people's mind.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of obstacles. I mean, you have, I don't know if you've
Thank
ever read
you.
the book
I was gonna ask
Man's
that.
Search for Meaning.
No, I have not actually. I've heard of it.
Excellent
But I
book.
haven't read
It's very short. You could probably read it in a couple days. I'll let you go discover that on your own. You can go talk about it
Yeah.
another time.
Man's
But
Search for
there's a
Meaning. That's
concept
one of
that's
the
brought
book
up.
recommendations from Nate today.
It's very good. It's very good.
Listen.
There's a portion in it where he's talking about the idea that when someone is living in a survival environment where the struggle is just to make it through the day. Your camera's out of focus, by the way. I don't know if you want to.
Is it?
Yeah, no, you're good now. You're good now. You just had to
Right.
shift a little bit. You're all set.
Okay. Thank you.
It is difficult for people to change their mind, and it's difficult for people to look at goals further down the road.
Okay. Yeah.
If to what am I going to eat, or will I have food to eat today? If that's a question you're asking right now, you don't have the ability to plan 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
Like psychologically, it's almost impossible to do.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Guns, Germs, and Steel?
Yes.
By,
yes.
okay. Jared Diamond.
Jared Diamond.
Yeah. So it's the other side of the conversation. That's more of the discovery of how the West won the world, pretty much.
Right.
And these people are more on the side that did not manage to actually make those breakthroughs.
Yeah. I mean, some of it I go, hey, guys, you got to this place that's dry for 9 months out of the year, and every animal can kill you, and the trees have thorns this long that are sharp enough to pierce your skin. Why did you stop there?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a real honest question. I kept thinking, I'm like, who gets to this place and says this is home forever?
Yeah.
It's
you know,
it was an interesting
that's
place.
a real curious question, and it's a great question.
It is.
Right?
I mean,
could it be that warring tribes wouldn't let them, just like any other animal, we have that predatory and territory, behavior? And was it that they weren't able to actually go against those? I mean, they're likely not able to answer that question, right?
Oh,
likely,
I don't think there is a real answer to the question. I think the reality is, as we explore and expand across the globe, people are just trying to survive. And if they find a way to survive where they're at and they are at peace with it, you're not going to go try to find what's better. And it takes a unique person to be in a challenging environment and find a way to survive there. It takes an equally unique person to go pick up and move and go somewhere else when you've figured out a way to sustain life where you're at. Like not everybody wants to go to Mars, but we have this one weirdo who really he's brilliant, but he wants to go to Mars, and he's going to invest ungodly amounts of resources that could solve a bunch of local problems, but he's choosing to do the thing that is, there's no value statement attached to that. It just takes a unique person to do both. It takes a unique person to go solve the problems around you right now. It takes a unique person to go think about the problems in the future. It takes a unique person to go and try to go to Mars.
We need all of them. We need all of them.
Yeah.
That's just that. That's also the nature of human beings.
Yeah.
So I agree, not to digress into that, but yeah.
So, Peace Corps, I think that's a general synopsis. You're there for 2 years. You're just trying to build relationships with the community. You're trying to find areas that you can improve. I did that project with a buddy of mine. We did a workshop over a couple of weekends where we took some people from my village to his village. He was a 3rd-generation volunteer. I was a 1st-generation volunteer. We were teaching people how to establish tree nurseries, primarily focusing on fruit trees and agricultural products beyond just timber. I really liked avocado trees. It was avocado oil, easy to extract. You can do it with very rudimentary technology. Your yield per hectare on a avocado farm, if you're trying to extract avocado oil, is significantly higher than the local alternatives. So there was that.
By the way, if anybody's not familiar with what a hectare is, it's a specific measurement of land.
It's 100 meters by 100 meters.
Yeah, just so it's And what happens when you're highly proficient and you've been in the conversation for a while, that's how it comes out. Like Nate's expressing it. And for anybody who's watching, that's what it's not the guy from the Odyssey. It's
it's
a
Odyssey book by Homer, for those of you who don't understand what that is.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that was a big project. We did that over a couple of weekends. We had a few hundred people involved in, like local people involved in that, and they got to go through that education, how to prep seeds, how to get them to germinate, how to care for the plants in the short term until they got to a point where you could start to propagate them, how to properly plant a tree, especially given the local environment. That was super fun. We had a great reception. The challenging thing for me is that my Peace Corps service ended at the end of or at the start of COVID. So rather than having another volunteer come in immediately following the close of my service, there was no one there for a couple of years, and that made me pretty sad because that was a pretty big investment, and I was looking forward to handing off some of the projects that I had put work into onto the next volunteer, and I didn't have that the ability to do that, which was sad to me. But
did they give
it
you
is what it is.
Did they give you any kind of follow-up that let you know specifically how effective your work was after no one else followed?
No one was there. No one was there for 2 years. I had the volunteer that came in and ended up replacing me several years later. I did get a chance to talk with her for a little bit, which was cool. A lot of the stuff had kind of, it had been some time, and it's just tough. They go right back into their, when you're talking to a small community, a village there is really like the extended family of one group. You have the head of the village, his sons, their wives, his brothers, their wives. There were probably 50 people in my village, including children. The next town over would be another, basically another family compound. And there were some interesting cultural things we could dig into, but maybe for another time. But
yeah, that'd be a great rabbit trail. But
yeah. No, I could go down that one all day. So when you're dealing with someone who's providing for their family and they're on a razor thin margin, if I come to you and I say, Chad, I understand that you found a way to provide for your kids and your wife, fiance, girlfriend, whatever your situation is, but wives, and the polygamy is allowed over there, so it might be multiple. And I say, Chad, I know you found a way to survive in this environment. I need you to risk all of that and do what I'm telling you to do, and it's going to be better. And you say, well, can you guarantee that it's going to be better? It's like, well, I can't really guarantee it. Like, there's a risk that it fails, but it is likely that it will succeed, and you will then have a margin. And you're going to go, hey, Nate, like, I appreciate that you're coming and trying to help me, but if you can't financially back me in the event that what you're suggesting fails, I don't have anything to spare. And if if the sacrifices you're asking me to make don't come to fruition, and lead to a growth, now I have to not send my kid to school, or I have to not eat for a week. Like, we're talking pretty serious and immediate
survival, right? You've hit the survival level.
When I'm asking you to risk everything for something that I know will benefit you, but you don't know for sure, and what you're doing now has helped your family and your people survive for generations, you're going to tell me to get away from you. Like you're not going to listen to what I have to say.
So to add to that, for people to understand the psychology to that too, it's not just the initial, it's the sociology to it, or whatever you want to refer to it as, is that within the people that are in the United States, we're in a culture that accommodates for risk because we have a social safety net that if you do take a big enough risk that it could hurt you, but you'd still have the ability to pick yourself up. And you can pick yourself up, but other people can support you, like welfare, things like that. But we also have that. With that comes the repetition of thinking, the ability and the allowance to daydream about risk. Where in this particular circumstance, the ability to daydream about risk is likely much lower, so they don't occupy as much time even daydreaming about it because it is too risky and there's not enough social net. So whenever somebody like Nate comes in and says, hey, if you take a risk on this, you can actually talk about extending margins. You can actually talk about building your lifestyle into more of a business structure that can give you the opportunity to really pull your family up and your community up. But you have to learn these things. But it takes risk. And there's history, real generations, not generation in Peace Corps being 2 years, but like real generations, full lifespans, within children, not occupying, entertaining any thoughts about risk because risk is dangerous, where risk in our society is just risky.
And we're also talking about farmers. Their cycle is a yearly cycle.
Yes.
right? They have a monsoon season, which is 3 to 4 months. You have basically, it rains every day for a couple months, and then it doesn't rain at all for 8 to 9 months, like not a drop. And while I was there was half the country was in a drought. They had 10 days of rain for a full calendar year. That's not enough to survive. Like, there was famine in half the country, which is a word that I had only really experienced in Bible school.
Right.
We did our Bible classes.
You can only conceptualize it, but
yeah, it's just beyond kind of
Yeah.
our understanding to what that really looks like to be in a famine. But
Mhm.
I'll tie kind of my experience there a little bit to your maturity project and a couple of the pillars.
Yeah, please.
Talk about like social maturity, and
Community.
yeah, well, that, but
And
also just
Adam. Yeah.
communication and interpersonal maturity
Mhm.
was a big point of growth. There was you go in as an educated white American,
Mhm.
especially a man. I mean, acknowledging, I'm not one to really focus on that philosophy of the privileged and whatnot, because
Yeah.
I think that oversimplifies some things. But certainly in that environment, being you realize the privilege of just being born an American, and the veneration that was afforded me when I got there as a white educated American man, was it honestly made me uncomfortable. I when I was growing
Mhm.
up, especially through high school and college, and even now, I'm not one to hold my opinions quietly. I'm gonna share my mind, and I do my best, especially now more so than maybe when I was younger, to express those opinions with courtesy and respect, for the people around me, for my environment. But prior to the Peace Corps, I was a little bit more aggressive and spoke with a probably more authoritative tone. My
Mhm.
siblings and my family would probably argue that I still do that, but it's a little bit different. I think anytime you're back at home with your family, you tend to revert to the ways that you were
Mhm.
when you all shared the space. But in general, I think I do a better job of not doing it quite so aggressively, simply trying to present the idea in a way that I think will be received.
Mhm.
Prior to my time in the Peace Corps, I would just state my opinion. But I realized, having had some experiences with the locals, and my hosts in my village, that when I would share my opinions, it
Yeah.
was almost received as gospel. Like, they
Yeah.
just believed me, and my voice carried a level of authority that I was not used to or comfortable with. Now, I think
Mm.
that there were some volunteers that I observed to not take, not that they deliberately took advantage of that reality. I don't know that they were as aware as I was of that reality, of the authority that they carried. And I don't think that they took it as a responsibility and something to be taken very seriously. Some did, for sure.
Yeah.
But there were some that did not. And I would witness people speaking poorly of others, or speaking poorly of even, their own country. We're there as, in a way, ambassadors to the country that we're, representing in
Yeah.
America. And they did not seem, they were angry. A lot of liberal voices in the Peace Corps,
Mhm.
and they would express a distaste for to America as a country, for Americans in general, for American politics. Trump had just been elected, so it was pretty tense moment. Um,
Yeah.
and they just didn't take it seriously. And I'm like, you do not understand how you're viewed, I don't think, or you do understand, and you're just, you don't have that maturity,
Yeah.
in
100%.
understanding how you're viewed and understanding the responsibility that comes with that. So that was a big thing for me in learning to keep my temper in check.
Mhm.
There were just moments where there was cultural clash, and I would get very frustrated with people who would be, admittedly disrespectful. They'd borrow tools or something like that I had, I was had a couple $100 a month that I got to use for, food, materials, resources, to take care of my hut and my little area, in the
Right.
village. And they would borrow things. I was like, I have the only hammer in the village, and you borrowed it, and you broke it. How did you break? It's a hammer. How did you break a
Yeah.
hammer? And that was really frustrating. And in the beginning, I would get visibly upset, and it took some growth to realize like, okay, I hold a position here, whether I deserve it or like it or not, where I need to take on some responsibility and some ownership of how I'm viewed, or I'm gonna damage relationships. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
put people in a very uncomfortable place, and so that was a huge point of growth and maturity. And I need to make sure people, if nothing else, come away thinking of Nate as a kind American,
Right.
as a representative of my community, my country, my family, etc.
So altruism and narcissism are opposites of one another, right? And
Yeah,
yeah, uh, what you just expressed from some of the people that you've interacted with, you were there for altruistic means, right? Which is ideally what we're sold when it comes to the Peace Corps. And then you had people that came in with their own personal ideologies that had narcissistic tendencies, right? Like borrowing the hammer, breaking it. And they probably didn't have a whole lot of apologies for it, probably more of an excuse making or something along those lines. But the purpose of what you were there for was to make a difference for the people that you were submersing yourself in their communities, and the graciousness that they allowed you into their community to do anything in the first place, because they don't have to let you in. No. So that's the part of the problems that I have, is that what happens when you're immature is you are much easier to manipulate. As you go into the Peace Corps, you're typically going in because you have a heart for it, right? You have a desire to try to make a difference. And now it's a matter of how mature you are. For you, and my recognition of your behavior and your experiences there, is you went into it with more of a mature position, because this needed to see beyond you. You were just there as a guide, and then other people got involved in the way that they got involved. So I can see that. One, also longevity of the Peace Corps. If that type of behavior continues, the immature behavior, whatever granted them access is another aspect of the immaturity. If it continues, the reputation will touch places that the Peace Corps could truly help. But the people that are in the ranks will cause it problems. This is one of the
yeah,
problems that I have with politics, is that politics doesn't care. It's looking for an advantage, typically. So playing politics is
sure.
typically just looking for the advantage. And it's usually looking for the advantage in the immature, because the mature person typically doesn't go that direction.
Yeah, I mean, so to defend some of the, I would argue that what I'm speaking of are the areas where I certainly have maybe more experience, and
Mm-hmm.
because of how I was brought up and educated, I had a higher level of maturity going in. Admittedly, I was
Mm-hmm.
also a couple years older than the average volunteer. Most volunteers go immediately after they graduate college, and I had been in the real world for a couple years, which changes the perspective
Right.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I'll admit, I'll be the first one to admit that there were areas where I was not as mature. There were some volunteers who maybe didn't take as seriously the role that they held in the minds and hearts of the people around them, but they were very effective, and they did a tremendous amount of work. And they said, I'm not going to think about who and what I am in the environment that I'm in. I'm just going
Mm-hmm.
to do as much as I can.
Right. The
And
altruistic version.
right, and it's a
Yeah.
different. You go back to your pillars. They just have strengths in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would labor through the language barrier with everybody I talked to and have hours and hours of conversation. It was exhausting. I don't know if you've ever had to deal with a language barrier for an extended period of
Mm-hmm.
time. Anyone who has understands how mentally exhausting it is. I mean,
Incredible.
I think I have an above average vocabulary, certainly above average working vocabulary. And I try to maintain that. I think it's useful in my
Mm-hmm.
efforts to communicate with people, and to accurately portray the thoughts that I have, to say what I mean and not some shadow of the intended thought that I'm trying to communicate. When you have to dumb down your vocabulary to a severely limited number of words, it
Mm.
is mentally taxing. Right. And that's something that I, because of my maturity in one area, was willing to do. And other people, they didn't do that. But what they did do is they would put in the work. And they would, even if they had no counterparts in their village who were willing to contribute their own efforts and resources into making things happen, they said, okay, look, I'm just going to do it myself. And I applaud them. Like, in many ways, I would say, oh man, I really wish I was more like that. And I used more of my energy to just do and do and do and do. And then they would see the value of what you were trying to preach. And I spent more time trying to communicate and educate, which in its own right was effective. And so, there are certainly areas that each and every person who goes in there with a genuine intention to serve, you could look at the fruits of their labor and say, oh, they went in there with the wrong ideas or intentions. I think there are a handful of people that I witnessed who did not have a heart to serve, and they went in there selfishly, and they're narcissists. I think that was the exception. I think there were a lot of people who had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah.
And then there were, the handful of people who really went in there with a pure heart and a true intention to try to serve and do their best. I like to think myself that third category, but there are certainly some areas where if you were observed from the outside, say, oh, he was selfish in this area.
Yeah.
Look at this section, this 3-month period where he didn't do anything. I was like, yeah, I mean, I didn't, because I was lonely and depressed, living alone in a hut in Africa with nobody who spoke English around me. And it was really hard. And everyone goes through periods like that.
Yeah.
So I don't want to oversimplify and say, well, I was this great volunteer and I didn't, there were areas where I look back and I go, man, I really let that opportunity slip, and I could have done better. And I look at other volunteers who had a very different approach, and in some areas I think did a bad job in XYZ conversation, but I say, man, they actually did a wonderful job in ABC situation and better than I would have done. So, I just, I don't want it to come across as though I'm praising or celebrating myself and my own efforts, when there are definitely areas I could have done better. And, if I went back now, knowing what I know now, it would be a different experience.
Absolutely. And it says that it's a testament to a large heart and an intention to live further into purpose, right? The 8th area of maturity, spirituality and purpose. And as we discussed as well, it's the order by which all of this stuff falls is so individualized that you can't really say it needs to be the first area, because some people, they don't realize purpose, or they just, survival is purpose.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that people don't get locked into the idea that after you get all 7, then you can look at the 8th. It's not how this stuff works. It's just to categorize in a way to teach and to understand. Nate lives in purpose. That's another thing that really stands out about him. Was when I started hearing about the Peace Corps efforts, that's a purpose-driven life. He's not walking away from that with the intention that he's going to throw that on his resume and get a 6-figure job out of it. It's just that there was something to do, and obviously he was going to get development and growth out of it, but he was at service for other people. And that is a massive thing that our communities have been moving away from. We've been hijacked in a way, not to go down that rabbit trail, but just know that to take away all of the stigma and the agenda stuff to get to the purity of it is what I've experienced with Nate. That's how he was towards this, to be just genuinely out to do something to make a difference, to enrich his experience, because he's got this life to live. And what kind of impact are you going to leave because you lived? So he's out to do something. My experience of him when he was working with me is that Nate also does what he can to imbue that into the roles of the people that he works with. So it's a beautiful thing, because there's 8 areas of maturity, right? All it is it's categorical, and it's the best way to create something that people can understand in a way they can learn, because that's how education is put together, right? You have science class, you have math class, you have these things. It's just categorize and then integrate. So as we're talking about, where do you put relationships in the 8 areas of maturity? Well, community, and then what type of relationship? So it's community in conjunction with, if it's a partner in a relationship, then you're going to have emotion, you'll have sexuality. If it's an intimate partner, That's not the only. If you have a power couple situation, which I have a relationship course that I teach as well, and a power couple is going to have business, finance, emotion, sexuality, and community built into it with purpose. Where's the physical being? It actually encompasses the whole thing, because once a mature person actually aligns with another person, they start talking about all areas necessary to hold a higher degree of maturity. Physical body, it's important. You need to keep it healthy. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how much money you make. If you die prematurely or you have bad health, you can't experience life without the tainted value of ill health. So anyway, I know I'm digressing a little bit. I just felt like this was a moment to kind of encompass the entire program in a way that can come back to our conversation. So now, Nate, with this, we did talk a little bit. You have 2 areas of proficiency in one area that you really want to grow more in. Wait, or I think it's the other way around, right? For you, you had 2 areas you wanted to grow in, and one area you considered to be highly proficient. Was that correct?
I think it was like kind of 2 and 2.
Okay, 2 and 2. So please open those up for us, because we're going to close up in the next 10, 15, 20 minutes. So if you want to spend the rest of this time kind of talking about those, basically it's 4, right? It's 2 areas and 2 areas. Take us through what your assessment has been so far from those, and where you're starting to see things a little different, or where you now know you can communicate differently with them.
Yeah, so I'll start with the areas in which I believe myself to be more proficient or more mature. Start with what I think should be number 1 for everybody: spirituality. That's I think there is a right answer. Ultimately, I could talk to you for hours on kind of how I've come to that conclusion, but basically, I find it to be logically obvious that God, the universal identity, exists. If I, a finite, discrete structure, have achieved consciousness, certainly infinity must be conscious. And what is infinity if not God? I'll spare you kind of how I've gotten from there to Christianity, but Christianity, I think, is again, clear and obvious choice. And the more I submit to that, the more peace I find. And I think peace and maturity have I think they are mutually dependent characteristics or skills almost. The more you find peace, the easier it is to grow in maturity. The more you grow in maturity, the more you find peace in things. And they have just such a tightly bound relationship for me. And in the people that I know that seem to have a high level of both. I'll bring up a couple of points where I kind of reached a cusp and was kind of faced with an ultimatum in my own heart when it comes to spirituality. One was while I was in the Peace Corps for the first time in my life. I was facing adversity in thought and direct attacks as a result of what I believed, not from the people who were from Zambia, but from my fellow volunteers. Lots of very left-leaning liberal individuals who I give them the benefit of the doubt. I think that they had good intentions. I don't think they're bad people, but certainly they viewed, generally, I would say, as a result of being wounded by people who shared my worldview, in that they claimed to be Christian but did not treat people the way that Christ
some
would have
form of indoctrination,
dictated,
one way or another. Right.
Yeah, and aggressive, rude, mean, whatever. And they had hurt, and as a result, they were rather resentful of people who believed in Christ. And I was kind of confronted in that environment with the question of, okay, Nate, you've kind of explored these other ways of viewing and approaching the world. You haven't been all in on faith in Christ and in me, kind of a conversation I was having with God. I was confronted with the question of, okay, are you going to define yourself through yourself, or are you going to define yourself in me? Is your identity going to be based on the foundation of you are a Christian. And I said yes, and I kind of stood up for what I believed in there. And I said, look, like I'm sorry you've had these negative experiences, but this is who I am, and I'm right. Like I'm not going to back down on this. I always try to treat people with love and respect. I do believe that there is a right, and it's it is an objective truth. And I can believe that you have parts of truth, but that is not an acknowledgement that there are multiple ways to the truth. There's just a lot of truth to be had, and you cannot understand the truth that I have, and you cannot want to accept the truth that I have, but it doesn't change the reality of truth. And so that was a big one for me. And then fast forward a couple of years, I was living in Orlando doing some insurance adjusting, and I was just in an environment that was steeped in hedonistic pursuit of pleasure. And I mean, certainly
more in the sexual category, or was it drug use, or
you name it,
okay.
all the ways,
okay,
partying, drugs,
okay,
sexual, whatever. Just the people that were there, regardless of the level to which they participated, the focus was on hedonistic pursuit. Sex, drugs, alcohol,
rock and roll, right?
Money, all of it. You know, that was the measure of someone's
success.
Any kind of success, equity. How cool were you was based on, you know, how much of any of those categories that you had. And it was really, really toxic for my mental health. But again, I was confronted with the question now, not just what will your identity be, but how will you live? Will you live for yourself, or will you live for me? Again, another conversation with God. Now, I was in an environment that was pretty awful, and relative to the average, my reputation was very good because the standard was so low. So like I was, people would unsolicited tell me like, oh, Nate, you're such a good person. Like, you know, you're name the compliment about integrity, morality, you know, spirituality, and living a good life and being a good person. In my own heart, I was like, I really feel like I'm doing a worse job now than I've done in a long time, but because I was surrounded by just a high level of temptation, and distraction. And so I was just confronted with this, like, are you going to live for yourself and your own pleasure, or are you going to live for me? And I said, okay, God. Now, it's not as though I'm perfect now. It's not as though I don't ever do anything that is the pursuit of my own pleasure. That's just a reality of life and humanity, and the struggle of trying to refine self. But I did make the decision, like, I'm going to live for God, and my decisions and the way that I act towards people, towards the world, towards any number of things will be on the basis of, you know, what is honoring to God. And I do my best to kind of, since then, I think I've done a much better job of representing what I believe to be an honorable, godly way to live. And the more I do that, again, the more peace I find. And
with that, if we were to package the concept of the eighth area, right? And again, I'm not saying the eighth area because I don't feel that it belongs in the first. I absolutely agree with you. For you specifically, and for a lot of people, if we were able to put spirituality and purpose at the first area of maturity, I would love it. But regardless, let's not get into the minutia of that. So to kind of encapsulate the spirituality purpose aspect is that your area of maturity, and that is that when other people are messing about and they're caught up in the immaturity that they have based in the current circumstances. We're not saying it's wrong that they are where they are. What gives you the guiding light to be able to stay on task is in that purpose and maturity, the purpose and spirituality, right?
Yeah, it's a submission. It's a submission. The reality is, like, you, as we acknowledged earlier on in the conversation, there is not a point at which you understand the fullness of what perfect maturity would be. Like, there's an infinite amount. Now, from my perspective as a Christian, the idea is that God is perfectly mature. Right. God is Christ is the perfect representation of what it is to be a man or person on this earth. Right. That is unachievable.
But you're guiding north. You're
but it
not
is
going to
the
get
guiding
there, but
principle.
that's
And the
the way
beauty
you
of
get
it being
there.
unachievable, right? The curse, you might view it as a curse because you can never achieve your goal and that you can never be perfect. But the beauty in that is that every day of my life I can grow, right? I can make progress every day, and that is a beautiful and, in my opinion, fun realization to have, to say I can explore something new, I can discover something new, and I can improve myself in a new way every single day if I'm intentional. And that's something you get from, I think, spirituality, and I think the submission to that higher power, and say I don't have to figure out what the right way is. I just have to trust infinity,
Yeah.
right? God, I have to trust perfection to show me what the right way is, and then follow that and pursue that in a way that is good, right? I can make progress every day, and that's great. So those are the two big realizations for me. And then, from that, I get a few different lessons. I'll share one with you just because I think it's a really beautiful one that I like to share with people. Genesis 1:27, it talks about God creates us in his image, man and woman, he creates in his image. Going back to the way that I treat people or try to treat people, what that informs me of is, or how that informs my view of people, as I say, okay, if we're all made in the image of God, I must view humanity as a reflection of God, right? A reflection of perfection. So I imagine this giant mirror, God, this perfect entity standing in front of this infinite mirror that is humanity. That mirror gets shattered into a billion pieces, right? Every little shard of that mirror is a person. If you know how mirrors are made, it's silver on the back of glass, right? Silver tarnishes. And so that it does reflect. Silver, when it's tarnished, it reflects light better than any other metal in the world. It said, like, of the visible spectrum, it's like 99 point some odd percent of the visible spectrum of light. We can see very, very clearly if it's well polished. My job is, regardless of how well polished it is, regardless of how tarnished it might be or how smudged the glass might be, my goal when I meet a person and I interact with them is I need to try to see the part of God, that perfect being that is reflected in that person, which is unique person to person. And the other part that I need to make sure of is I need to make sure that my mirror is as polished as it can be, so that when someone sees me, they see the part of God that I reflect.
Right.
And those are the two big lessons that, as it relates to how I treat people and area, the interpersonal maturity that I think is something that you've acknowledged and brought up a couple of times. And I would say that is kind of the source of that, both everything we've talked about and kind of that little lesson that I like to share with people. The other area of maturity that I think I like to think that I'm proficient in is the physical maturity, just taking care of your body. I've been in shape kind of my whole life, played sports growing up, and then played through college, and then got really into kind of bodybuilding style exercise afterwards. Had a period of I was mature in my discipline, but not in my approach. I was very narcissistic and focused on my appearance more so than my actual physical condition. I mean, they're related. So if you're taking care of the way that you look, you're going to be taking care of, eating the right food and being regimented and all of these things. Yeah, I wasn't in a healthy place. I was way obsessed about how I looked. Like, I wanted to, just be super sexy all the time and super lean. And I kind of hated my mentality, changed it, moved away from that kind of style of training and conditioning my body. And now I focus a lot more on my philosophy, and I share this with anybody who would be interested in me helping them or getting trained by me physically, is I say, look, the philosophy needs to be, what do you want to do with your body? And let's prepare it to do the things that you want to do. I like mountain biking. I like rock climbing. I like road biking. I like paddleboarding. I like kayaking. You name it. If it's outside, I want to do it. And I want to prepare my body to be able to do any of those activities with a high level of proficiency. And I don't ever want to have to say no to an activity because I don't feel as though my body is physically ready. So I prepare much more functionally. I'm gifted in that I'm pretty athletic. So my balance is good. My power is pretty good. So if I just maintain that, and I've been doing it for a long time. So that's my focus. I encourage anybody to focus that way. Don't think about the way that you look, because you're not going to look like me and I'm not going to look like you. But let's prepare your body to perform the best that it can, and then you'll see what a optimized version of your own body is. And that's cool. you should be happy with that.
Yeah.
And that has helped me a ton. Helped me with my opportunity in the Peace Corps. One of the biggest things they would do, you're going to have to ride your bike a lot. I said, I'm not worried about it. They said, I like a lot. I said, I'm really not worried about it. They said, like 20 miles a day. And I finally was like, hey, look, I think her name was like Angela. I was like, Angela, if there are 1,000 different things to worry about, the last one on my list is how far I'm gonna have to ride my bike.
Yeah.
And it helped me. I got to do, I did a bike trip for 3 days through the rural areas of Zambia. We got to go through the game park, saw elephants, giraffes, crocodiles, hippos, zebras, impala, warthogs, all from a bicycle, which was spectacular, like really, really special experience.
Was there a fence between you, or that was just completely open?
Completely open.
Wow.
Easily the most dangerous thing that I did.
Oh yeah, I was about to say, if a lion decides, actually, even some of the herbivores, they decide.
Yeah, really anything there can kill you. So.
Really, actually, yes.
Yeah. So
I mean, hell, a stingray took out Steve Irwin.
This is true.
And that man wrestled crocodiles.
He did.
So yeah. So
definitely
anyway,
dangerous. Super cool though. Super cool. On top of the benefits of if you're physically healthy, you're going to be. It'll help your mental health. Move your body. It'll keep you from being stagnant in other areas. If I'm stuck in a rut, if I'm between jobs, if I'm between goals, if I keep myself physically moving, I have a tendency to start being productive in other areas. If you allow your body to be stagnant, you're not going to be doing anything. I think the best when I go on a run or a long bike ride.
Yeah. So I wanted to throw something in. I was trying to look this up whenever, as you were speaking here, but I believe it was Aristotle, and I may be wrong on this, but he said that if you can't move, you can't think.
I think that was.
And he's a philosopher, right? And he put all of his students through Greco wrestling was a requirement for his school of philosophy. So the physical body absolutely will do better if you're capable of moving it. In the academics, so anyway, to throw that out there, I apologize if you caught me looking down, but I'm just trying to look that up real quick as we were speaking here. Yeah,
so that one was I gained the maturity just by success in action. I was just doing it, and I realized the benefit. And then especially later on after school, college, I was still playing sports. So you see the benefit as other people are not playing sports. They're not as physically fit. And you see, oh, you're enjoying life less than I am because you can't do things. And now I'm 32 and I see people who are thoroughly out of shape, and I'm still basically able to do everything that I was able to do in my early 20s. Teen years, maybe not. I was a lot lighter, man. Being 185 versus 205 that's a heavy 20 pounds. So I definitely, there's a difference in my ability to perform for sure. But whether it be just ability to enjoy life, recovery from injury, I had a pretty traumatic shoulder injury, just willed myself to remain active. And now I've made a full recovery, and I had a severe AC tear, which is a bummer. I wouldn't do that if you can avoid it. But 3 weeks ago, I benched 315 for the first time again. So you can make the recovery. And I'm big, make it be natural. That's more of a philosophical thing. Don't take anything extra, because in my opinion, I view it the same way I view plastic surgery. Your body is a temple. You've been given this one, and you should take care of it. And there is a beauty in allowing yourself of maintaining your body, but allowing yourself to age naturally, and accepting that now you are in a different place, in a different chapter in your life that you were a decade ago, and that's okay. And I think it's healthier, psychologically, spiritually. I think it's a healthier thing to just allow these things to, again, we go back to these things being connected. I'll jump ahead to, I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, I'll add one thing to that as far as it's so if anybody's familiar, the people that are watching as well as you are familiar with the movie Dirty Dancing with Patrick Swayze, and I forgot the actress's name. The actress she got rhinoplasty. According to what I've learned about her. And after she got, because like she was, because of the distinct look about who she is and how she behaved, she stood out because she was different enough. And she changed things about her in order to fit in, and then she disappeared.
Yeah.
So after Dirty Dancing, she really didn't show up in anything that people will recall or care for, because she decided to change who she is in order to fit in. And we don't need more copycats in this world. We need the individuals to show up and master who you are. I don't need Nate to be Chad or anybody else. The person that I value is Nate being Nate, right? The same as me being me. I don't want to be the next like guy impersonating somebody else. So it's just something to throw in. And now, and I apologize about digressing a little bit, but I wanted to expand a little bit on the fact that like you need to really master who you are, because the world needs you and all of your dynamic differences. So don't fit in, stand out, but stand out while you fit into society in a way to function, but not so much that you assimilate to be everybody else.
100%.
So and I apologize. And it was Aristotle, by the way, that did say, if you can't move, you can't think. I had to look that up. It's a tick of mine. So, all right, please continue, Nate. We're nearing the end of it, but I absolutely do not want to miss the other parts, because we had 2 and 2, right?
Yeah. So the two that I really want to work on, finances and business, which I think are closely tied together.
Absolutely.
Never been a priority of mine. I'm not the most money motivated person, for better or worse. I kind of resent it. I think while capitalism is effective I studied economics, so I know about it, but I just, I think that when you monetize something, it corrupts it, and it makes me sad more often than not. I can be an effective salesperson, but I do find a very base level kind of moral objection to convincing someone. I don't like to be sold to. I'm not the best target for sales, because as soon as I feel like someone's trying to sell me on something, I kind of intuitively go, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And I don't want to hear what you have to say. And I just assume that your product is not going to help me. And not that that's always the most productive, but I just don't want to hear it. And I don't, as soon as I get the sense that you're trying to promote your product more than you are trying to offer a solution to a problem that I've expressed, I don't really want to talk to you anymore. And so I don't like being that person. But I do realize the value in being your own advocate, in having confidence in the products that you do have, to say, hey, there is value here, and it's okay for me to demand compensation for offering a solution to your problem. I'm not good at asking for that. So there have been many cases where I've been in situations where I say, I can help here. And my instinct is to just offer the help.
Yeah.
I don't hate that about myself, but it's not the most lucrative approach.
Yeah. I can see that there's a stumbling block for you that's stopping you, right? Like I've shared this because at one point in time, I did this thing called Get Motivated. I went to the seminars in Tampa, Tropicana Fields. Hell, Colin Powell was there. There was a bunch of like big names. I forgot the guy from America's Most Wanted, Dave Walsh. He was there. There's a bunch of people there, like these big name people. And I realized as I went to that meeting or that particular presentation, the big arena thing, I had the belief that money was the root of all evil. What we typically do is we get influenced by the thing that most emotionally excites us. And we miss the things that aren't as emotionally exciting. And typically the things is mostly that is mostly emotionally exciting to us is going to be the thing that makes us feel like our safety is jeopardized. So we're like, well, this person's taking advantage of people. Well, yeah, you're going to look at your own safety in that scenario and be like, I don't want to associate myself with that person. And that's a marker that you'll put up and say, you know what, let me back away from this. And you look at the characteristics and values about that particular person or the behaviors that have made that come to your awareness through somebody else's statement. Great philanthropists in this world that truly make a difference. And I'm not talking about a pseudo philanthropist like Bill Gates. I'm talking about real philanthropists. They had to master understanding how to make money and how to sell in such a way that they can do the greater good. And to me, I'm speaking to one of those people before they actually become that person. So when you have unlocked that particular part of you and the business and finance aspect of this, you will find out what arena you need to play in, whether that's in the financial advising, if it's in the investing, whatever it may be, that has you go, Peace Corps is more important. It's not that I'm saying it's wrong. It was perfect the way that it's worked because it is the truth of what's worked. And God will use you as God intends, right? So you just can't get in the way when you're being directed the next direction. And some of those things that are going to get in the way is how you don't quite understand the plan. And then you're going to rationalize your understanding of the plan. And you're going to say, well, money's not necessarily good or whatever it is. I'm not saying that is your narrative, but something in that realm has had you feel that finance and business are not necessarily that important. When you unlock that, Nate, you will be the next person that we talk about in the positive way. Is I cannot foresee something different for you. Other parts of you tell me that once that part's unlocked, the rest of you is just going to be like hanging onto a roller coaster or a rocket. No, and I'm not saying that to try to, plagiarize some sort of excitement you might have, say, subtly waiting. I'm not saying that for that reason. Those two areas show up for a very, very specific and important reason. Because the other parts of you feel fairly well developed in. And this is sharing from my experience of how I've felt about money, but I also engaging it based off my limited understanding of you. But I feel that you're so genuine that it's easy to know you. So however that affects you, I feel that that's the thing. It's like it's the chalk on the wheel before they pull it out for the plane to take off.
Yeah. Working on it.
Your humility is unbecoming of you. So yeah, that's another part that also will take some work, because humility is great, but there's a point in time when humility will rob you from other people understanding who you are. But you need to understand who you are, right? Because I'm not stating these things because I just want to fucking blow feathers, right? Pardon the language, but all right, I'm not into that. So business and finance, as you mentioned, they are interconnected. They're so closely connected. But the reason why they're separate is because you can be a family, you can be a trust fund kid, you are related to a trust fund. You may not need to work because you're financially set and somebody else did it for you. And the other side is you may not be financially set and you need to grow that, but you're more interested in the business anyway. The money is not that important by comparison to the progress through a business or creating one that works. So the Peace Corps needs the next connection that bridges that 3 generations.
Yeah. Well, so that's the business that I want is more of a nonprofit. And when I think about business, I think about, if you have your finances right, you're able to accrue some amount of resources. And then business is the application of those resources into something that sustains itself. Right. And so I have some ideas of what I'd like to do. I'd like to go back to Zambia. I'd like to, I have some projects. I have some ideas of how much investment it's going to cost to really get it going. I'd like to go back into doing that. It's business in the sense that it needs to be a self-sustaining organization, not trying to do it for profit. As I said, I'm not particularly money motivated, but I do need to get the finances right so that I can fund the projects that I want to do. Once I have the base level investment established, and I've got that part figured out, then I can sustain myself, and my hope is that I can show some results and get other people to invest in the idea and the project. Again, more philanthropy than anything else, but that's the goal. And as far as the business where I feel like I need to mature is just there is an art to getting people to buy in. I think I can do that. The part that I think is and I'll shout out to my friend John, who's very good at this, is once someone is bought in, to encourage them enough that they feel as though they can take ownership of the results and the fruits of the labor and resources that have been invested. And that, I think, is a key part of business that is a developed and a learned skill that mostly I think it comes down to follow up. You know, if you have the interpersonal skills and you can communicate and communicate a contagious enthusiasm, I think that's part of it. But it's the consistency of following up and saying, you know, hey, here we are, and look at us, look at what we're doing as a team. And if you can do that effectively, you can maintain the investment. And so I think I need to work on that, and the finances. I got a couple things lined up that I think are going to be good opportunities, and hopefully one or two of them is going to come to fruition and get me moving towards the goal. I have my 5-year goal. I just got to work on year 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah. Well, I can foresee, based off the way that you have done things so far that I've known, I can foresee the success of it. So stay true to it. I don't think that's something that just kind of goes without saying. So on my side, it's more of one, I can tell you that I'm incredibly grateful for the time that you spent with me today. You're an impressive and remarkable human being. You are a fantastic testimony for homeschool, because we got to start somewhere, right? And the way you handle people, I can see how you'll be successful with what you're up to. I'd love to have you back to kind of give us updates, how things are coming along. If you have other like insights or epiphanies when it comes to this particular education that we're putting together, please feel free. You're welcome to reach out to me. We can find a time that we can actually set up another one, kind of go through whatever it is that we want to talk about. And you can see me fail forward and fail up, right? That's what we all do. That's the whole point of this, is that, look, your goals are outside of your abilities at the moment, but you stay true to it. You're going to learn every lesson necessary to be successful at it. You just have to stay true to it, and you're going to get your ass kicked along the way, but you're going to look at it as a lesson, not as a punishment. And as 100%. Long as you do that, you're going to be successful. You just may be successful in a way that's different than the way you envisioned it. And that's another bittersweet aspect, because when you're there, it's hard to recognize it because you think it's supposed to be another way you conceive before you have the maturity to understand what it's really like to be there. It's going to develop you, not just you develop it. So, yeah, you've been an absolute pleasure, Nate. Is there any way that the people that would watch this would be able to connect with you? If you, is anything call to action, or do you have just, hey, if you're interested in more of what I'm up to, reach me at this email, whatever your contact point would be.
Yeah, you can shoot me a message on Instagram, probably be the easiest way. And then I'm part of an organization called ACC, American Conservation Coalition. It's a nonprofit that I spend time doing. We're getting started in Tampa. We're starting a branch. So my Instagram is, I wish I knew it all, N_Mayer, MAYER 23. And then shoot me a message if you want information on ACC. We do beach cleanups, coastal restoration, whatnot, trying to stay involved in, making my community better. I think environmental conservation is great. And I'll send you a link if you're interested for the website, talk about what ACC does nationally. Locally, it's a lot of cleanups and coastal restoration. It's in every state, or just about. And then obviously the projects and the local projects are going to be a little bit different. It's going to be dependent upon what that community needs. Not a lot of coastal restoration to be done in South Dakota or something like that. Like if you're landlocked, it's going to be very different, but same idea, planting trees and doing things that are going to make your local environment a little bit cleaner, a little bit prettier. So for the time being, that's what I got. Chad, I appreciate your time, man. Always a pleasure talking to you.
And if you want the link to this, Nate, just send me the link. I'll put it in the description for us, okay? Or I'll have Ed do it for us. Other than that, you've been a pleasure, man. And thank you so much for your time. You've been incredibly generous sharing yourself as well as your time on this day. And if anybody's interested in reaching out, don't hesitate, okay? So as I say all the time in this entire thing is share this video with the person in your life that you want to get to understand you're up to something. Is if you're going to make some changes, if you don't let your support system understand you're up to some changes, what'll happen is you will go through stress with those changes. As it happens and you stress with your support system around you, they're going to want to try to help you with your stress. They may try to pull you back to the behaviors that you set in your mind that you're going to change to get the life you're up to or the life you're after. Share this video. You don't need to necessarily enroll them in everything you're up to, just so that they understand that when you're going through those stress, not to do anything to interfere with that. Empathy crabs are real. Nothing's wrong with what they're up to. They're just trying to care for you in such a way that may be pulling you back into the bucket. You're out for freedom. So share this video with those people. Nate's a great person to actually inspire other people by. He's inspired me, and I'm an old dog sitting on the porch, right? So he's inspired me to bring him on. I was excited about having him here. I would love for you to share this video so that we can get more of the world to understand who this guy is, because he's up to something, guys, gals. So, all right. With that, I'm Chad Everett Broshears. It's a Maturity Project. This is my host today, or I'm sorry, my guest today, Nate Mayer. Mayer or Meyer? Mayer.
Mayer.
Mayer. Mayer. All right. He's a mayor. They play the mayor in the club, right? And if you guys want to find him, check out the link in the description of this video. Remember, yesterday's failures are opportunity for tomorrow's success. So with that, let's get up to something. Get up to it with us. All right. Till next time. We'll see you.
Bye.